Hi, it's Jenny Smith. In a previous video, I talked about research-backed ways to prevent unwanted cellular phone use before it occurs and which intervention methods are rated by students as effective after it occurs. If you want to get down to the nitty-gritty researchy bits of that topic, go see that video. To sum up, the most effective reactive interventions are removing a student from the class, removing the cell phone from the student, or a verbal reprimand or warning. The most effective preventative interventions are having a class size smaller than 20, having a group discussion about the policy, having more group activity during your lessons, or showing videos. Now today our goal is to teach students to use cell phones appropriately by coaching appropriate use either verbally or non-verbally during class. So when is it appropriate for students to be on their devices? Working with your co-teacher ahead of time, develop a plan. Ask each other, is it okay for us if students look up answers during class on their phone? Are we okay if students use a cell phone after they finish their work or they finish reading or writing exercise? Is it never appropriate for cell phone use? How do we feel about if a student pulls out a cell phone during a class discussion? What about if a student is looking up information related to the topic? Can they use a cell phone while another student is speaking? While the instructor is speaking? While instructions are being given? You might ask each other also, which types of verbal or nonverbal intervention have you found effective in the past? Have you already determined some of these verbal and nonverbal interventions with your class during a cell phone policy discussion? When you're working with a co-teacher, commit to demonstrate unity and support of each other whenever correction is necessary. Now let's talk about verbal coaching. Verbal coaching is when you use words to coach students about correct behavior. You might say something like this: please put your phones upside down and under your seats until the end of this discussion. Or, for the next 5 minutes, please put your phone away. Or, we need to look up this information. Please get out your cell phones and... Or, when you get to url.com, hold your phone up. When we're all there, we will. While student Y is speaking, put your phone wherever you want it. Use your phone to take notes while I read aloud. Text me or our group chat the answer to this question. During this video, put your phone in silent mode and place it face down on your desk. We are about to... Where should you place your phone? Why do you think so? And then you could say this whispering with genuine concern. Hey, your phone is out. Is there a problem at home? Can I help? Our policy is that we use phones only in emergencies. You might even draw a note on your lesson plan to cue you to remind students to put cell phones up and down when you're writing your course instruction. Now, how about a cell phone break? This is another type of verbal instruction. You would tell students to put their phones away until time X, maybe until 8 o'clock, or until activity A is completed, and then they'll have free time. A cell phone break might be useful, especially when you're trying to wean particularly recalcitrant students from misuse. Now, let's have some real talk for a second. Students are not magically going to follow your cell phone policy perfectly. They just aren't. Whether the cell phone misuse is intentional or defiant, or whether the misuse is simply a mistake, you will need to correct students sometimes. How can you be certain that when you're correcting students, you are doing so out of love and not out of anger? Let's read the following information from Elder Spencer J. Condi. We've probably all felt it, whether it was as we taught a primary class, disciplined our children, or discussed a problem with our husband or wife. That sudden, irrepressible irritation, sometimes flaring into anger. And we may have let our tongues expose our exasperation, excusing our passions under the guise of reproving betimes with sharpness when moved upon by the Holy Ghost. But at such times of emotion, how can we be sure that our feelings are really expressions of the Spirit and not just adrenaline generated by our anger? It's a great question, right? Well, Elder Condi goes on to answer this question, and he says, we may be more certain that the Holy Ghost moves upon us when the intensity of the reproof is appropriate to the cause, when we reprove promptly without harboring ill will, when we follow our reproof with an increase of love, when we weigh our words and our feelings carefully, when we are and have been in tune with the Spirit prior to the reproof, and when after the reproof we feel at peace with ourselves. Before we make a correction to a student, we ensure that we know all the facts so that we can speak with pure knowledge, which shall greatly enlarge the soul without hypocrisy and without guile. We do not seek to harm, to stretch the truth, or to overstate the problem. We make sure that we know students are actually misusing phones before we react. Our objective is to sincerely help the student and address the specific issue at hand. We don't make students feel inferior or guilty or try to humiliate them into compliance. Seek to build students up by thanking them. Chances are most of your interactions with students regarding cell phones involve more correction than praise. How can you find more ways to praise students for complying in your classroom? We'll talk more about positive reinforcement in a few minutes. Now let's switch gears to nonverbal coaching methods for cell phone management. Nonverbal cues are gentle reminders to students, either individually or as a group, that their behaviors are off task. The goal of nonverbal coaching is to intervene without breaking up the momentum of the class or causing a worse disruption by correcting a student than the misbehavior itself is causing. Now, here are some common nonverbal cues that you might use in the LDS classroom. The first one I want to talk about is the most common one you're likely to use, and it's the one that I don't recommend. This is a pause, or a pause and a glare. This means you stop teaching and just wait until students comply, or that you stop and give a student a dirty look until they comply. Note that dirty looks and pauses are not shown by research to be particularly effective, and teenagers may find this particularly humiliating because of how much value they place on how others perceive them. I don't recommend this. There are better nonverbal interventions. One I like to use is a dramatic demonstration of the desired phone location. Now, this is best if you've established a policy that during certain activities, cell phones go under the seat or face down on the table. Just continue on with your lesson material and show students where the cell phone is supposed to be. This could be coupled with a little verbal introduction and pause. Okay, everyone, we're now moving into group discussion. Another example is proximity and circulate. Now, one of the most important classroom management skills you can develop to prevent problems before they arise is circulate. This means exactly what it sounds like. Just walk around the classroom, in and amongst the desks, as much as you can while you teach. Change your position often. Do it before a problem arises. That way, when you need to use proximity or you need to approach a student who needs some correction, you can do so without drawing a lot of attention to the problem or even speaking at all. Just stand near the student and the situation will probably correct itself. Or you may actually find that the student is using the phone for an allowed purpose. When you circulate every day, it's very easy to use proximity for corrections without disrupting class or humiliating students, and you'll find a lot of problems stop before they even get started. Now, how about the desk tap? You can use this in conjunction with Circulate when you move around the classroom. Don't say anything or change the cadence of a lesson. Just tap the desk if a student has a phone out when it should be put away. If you use a cell phone jail, you may need to take your jail over to the student for them to drop the cell phone in jail. Now again, you don't need to stop the lesson or discuss it. Just bring the jail over for the student to deposit the phone in until the end of class. This is an intervention rated effective by students in research. And if you've discussed it as part of your cell phone policy and the group has determined it's the consequence for unwanted use, students are more likely to comply. Your goal with nonverbal interventions is to not disturb the lesson. Another positive nonverbal intervention is some praise, giving somebody a thumbs up, patting them on their shoulder, putting a check mark on the board on your caught choosing the right list, something like that. Now, to spin off into a tangent, right, which is what I promised we'd do earlier in the lesson, let's talk about positive reinforcement. This is the second time I've covered this material, but we're going to do it again here. Both of these are verbal and nonverbal reinforcers. Now, positive reinforcement ought to be your preferred cell phone management method in seminary because, as you know from our earlier lectures, teacher-student rapport is most likely to change student behavior. In the seminary classroom, we are not focused on helping students learn the most, but we are focused on helping students live the best. Positive reinforcement can help with that goal. Positive reinforcement helps with motivation as well. If you're having students who are struggling with being motivated to attend class, finding ways to help them feel good while they are at class, as opposed to feeling scolded for being late or when they ask a dumb question or if they have a phone out at the wrong time, can help them feel motivated to participate fully. So let's go briefly over some ways that you might use each in the seminary classroom. Natural reinforcers are those that happen naturally as a result of the behavior. One good example is how students develop friendships as they listen to others' members speak, or how they can feel the spirit when they're complying with a cell phone policy. You may need to help students identify a natural benefit to complying with a cell phone policy, especially feeling the spirit. Just remember how you felt as a teenager. Many of us had struggled to recognize the Holy Ghost. And you may, as a teacher, that's an opportunity for you to help students understand how their behaviors influence their ability to feel the Holy Ghost. Token reinforcers are those that are awarded for performing certain behaviors and can be exchanged for something of value, like a sticker chart or a point system. A lot of seminary teachers do group or individual token reinforcers during March Madness season, where students earn up a Brigham buck to spend at a seminary auction. I've done this myself, and I found it to work temporarily, but for me, it's very hard for me to use token tracking long term. Social reinforcers are those that involve expressing the approval of a good behavior, like when a teacher gives a thumbs up, or a smile or something like that. Find ways to thank teenage students in front of their peers when they do things right. Now, what about tangible reinforcers? Well, those are things you can actually physically touch. Now, this is harder to do in classes, church classes, because we have little or no budget. But if you're thinking about tangible positive reinforcement with teenagers, make sure that you're using age-appropriate reinforcers. Many teenagers will not go out of their way to earn a sticker or a piece of candy. Now, our goal today was to teach students to use cell phones appropriately by coaching appropriate use, either verbally or non-verbally. We talked about how to develop a plan with a co-teacher. We talked about how important it is to determine ahead of time how you're going to handle infractions, because they will occur. When you're working with a co-teacher, commit to demonstrating unity and support of each other when correction of a student is necessary. We talked about verbal interventions. You might direct a student to pick up or put down a cell phone based on the lesson segment and activity. You might use cell phone breaks. And we talked about how important it is to reprove with love and how to know if you're reproving a student with love. And then we talked about thanking or praising students as cell phones go down into the correct use. Nonverbal, we talked about nonverbal interventions. When we talked about dramatically demonstrating the cell phone's right position, we talked about how to use proximity and circulation. We talked about how to tap a desk or use a cell phone jail. And I recommended that you don't use a glare or a dirty look to try to control cell phone use. And at the end of the talk, we talked about the importance of positive reinforcement, natural, token, social, and tangible reinforcers, and how to use those in the seminary classroom. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Don't forget to take the post-instruction survey and help me finish my master's program. Thanks so much.